Everybody outside of that 1% has been denied. So I want you to take a few seconds.
Bernie Sanders is the next president of the United States, as our radio indicates to you right now. That is, if he is not shot, he is not killed, if he is not politically assassinated. As you know, the last elections, he cleanly also won the primaries of the Democratic Party. And then it was the same 1% within the Democratic Party that killed him politically, and therefore he wasn't the candidate. Now we have to tell you that by going across America, by going across the United States of America, by talking to many Americans from different faiths, from different organizations, from different community-based institutions, from different students, employed people, unemployed people, workers of any place. It seems that Bernie Sanders has them all. The 1%, the few families that have owned the country for many decades or centuries are now trembling, extremely worried about the next president of the United States of America. Everything is going to be put into practice. Every single operation probably will be executed against Bernie Sanders, and that will include even probably attempts to kill him physically. You already saw it. You already saw it in the primaries in Iowa, where he had from the very beginning, he had a very big wide distance between him and the rest of the employees of the establishment. That means in the other candidates from the Democratic Party, he had a big distance. Now we know that he actually won with double digits. But the powers that be, the establishment, made it impossible to bring that difference to the public. Because they knew. Can you imagine the message that would have sent across America? Bernie Sanders in the primaries in Iowa winning double digits. That would have been from news of all of the media. So they went ahead and integrated and executed their. Our understanding is that this has been in the work for many months. So they just put it into practice, and then they tried in New Hampshire, and it has worked, but not completely, because they are not showing the official results. They are not showing that Bernie Sanders is winning by double digits everywhere he goes. So now we're going to see in Nevada what they do. But peoples of the world, people of the United States of America, this is our chance. This is our one and only chance we're going to have since probably the founding of this nation. People have not had the chance that we have today, in which we can embrace each other and be one nation and one people for the first time in the history ever. Because, as you know, ever since before Bernie Sanders, the United States of America has had leaders who are not just super wealthy, but has been chosen by the super wealthy. Therefore, they have run the country in the interest of those which now is, according to many, not even 1% of the population. So America is now the time. America now is ready from the women movement, from the workers movement, from the LGBT community, from minorities, from teachers and professors, from employed and unemployed people. It's everywhere is Bernie, Bernie, Bernie. It seems that unless the establishment doesn't conduct its enormous fraud that they already have, that means computerized fraud, or they do something against Bernie Sanders' health or physical well-being. America could wake up in November after the elections knowing that finally one of them is the president now. Finally, somebody whose interest lays in the interest of the people is in the presidency now. Somebody who has everybody in mind, and somebody who is going to become the fixer of that America that is being broken ever since, according to many, since 1776. Lots of illusions, lots of hopes, lots of joy now are taking hold in the hearts of the American people and in the minds of the American people. First time in the history that someone who actually call himself a socialist will become the next president of the United States of America.
Political and social forces which define this historical period, this is that time. If there was ever a moment when we needed to stand up and fight against the forces of oligarchy and authoritarianism, this is that time. And if there was ever a moment when we needed a new vision to bring our people together in the fight for justice, decency, and human dignity, this is that time. In the year 2019, the United States and the rest of the world face two very different political paths. On one hand, there is a growing movement toward oligarchy and authoritarianism, in which a small number of incredibly wealthy and powerful billionaires own and control a significant part of the economy and exert enormous influence over the political life of our country. On the other hand, in opposition to oligarchy, there is a movement of working people and young people who, in ever increasing numbers, are fighting for justice. They are the teachers taking to the streets to make certain that schools are adequately funded and that their students get a quality education. They are workers. They are workers at Disney, Amazon, Walmart, and the fast food industry. Standing up and fighting for a living wage of at least $15 an hour and the right to have a union. They are the young people taking on the fossil fuel industry and demanding policies that transform our energy system and protect our planet from the ravages of climate change. They are women who refuse to give control of their bodies to local, state, or federal politicians. They are people of color and their allies demanding an end to systemic racism and massive racial inequities that exist throughout our society. They are immigrants and their allies fighting to end the demonization of undocumented people and for comprehensive immigration reform. Now, when we talk about oligarchy, let us be clear about what we mean. Right now, in the United States of America, 3 families control more wealth than the bottom half of our country, some 160 million Americans. The top 1% own more wealth than the bottom 92%. And 49% of all new income generated today goes to the top 1%. In fact, income and wealth inequality today is greater in the United States than in any time since the 1920s. And when we talk about oligarchy, it is not just that the very rich are getting much richer. It is that tens of millions of working class people in the wealthiest country on earth are suffering under incredible economic hardship, desperately trying to survive. Today, nearly 40 million Americans live in poverty, and tonight, some 500,000 Americans, including many veterans, will be sleeping out on the streets. About half of our country lives paycheck to paycheck, as tens of millions of our people are an accident, a divorce, a sickness, or a layoff away from economic devastation. While many public schools throughout the country lack the resources to adequately educate our young people, we are the most heavily incarcerated nation on earth. After decades of policies that have encouraged and subsidized unbridled corporate greed, we now have an economy that is fundamentally broken and grotesquely unfair. Even while macroeconomic numbers like GDP, the stock market, and the unemployment rate are strong, millions of middle-class and working-class people struggle to keep their heads above water, while at the same time, the billionaire class consumes the lion's share of the wealth that we are collectively creating as a nation. In the midst of a so-called booming economy, real wages for the average worker have barely risen at all, and despite an explosion in technology and worker productivity, the average wage of the American worker in real dollars is no higher than it was 46 years ago, and millions of people in our country today are forced to work 2 or 3 jobs just to survive. And here is something quite incredible that tells you all that you need to know about the results of unfettered capitalism. All of us want to live long, happy, and productive lives. But in America today, the very rich live, on average, 15 years longer than the poorest Americans. In 2014, for example, in McDowell County, West Virginia, one of the poorest counties in the nation, life expectancy for men was 64 years. In Fairfax County, Virginia, a wealthy county, just 350 miles away, life expectancy for men was nearly 82 years, an 18-year differential. The life expectancy gap for women in the two counties was 12 years. In other words, the issue of unfettered capitalism is not just an academic debate. Poverty, economic distress, and despair are life-threatening issues for millions of working people in this country. While the rich get richer, they live longer lives. While poor and working families struggle economically and often lack adequate health care, their life expectancy is declining for the first time in modern American history. Taken together, the American dream of upward mobility is in peril. In fact, if we don't turn things around, our younger generation will, for the first time in living memory, have a lower standard of living than their parents. And that is not acceptable. Globally, the situation is even more shocking. With most of the world's wealth concentrated among a very few, while billions of people have almost nothing. Today, the world's richest 26 billionaires, 26, now own as much wealth as the poorest 3.8 billion people on the planet, half of the world's population. But the struggle we are facing today is not just economic. Across the globe, the movement toward oligarchy runs parallel to the growth of authoritarian regimes, like Putin in Russia, Xi in China, Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia, Rodrigo Duterte in the Philippines, Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, and Viktor Orban in Hungary, among others. These leaders meld corporatist economics with xenophobia and authoritarianism. They redirect popular anger about inequality and declining economic conditions into violent rage against minorities, whether they are immigrants, racial minorities, religious minorities, or the LGBT community. And to suppress dissent, they are cracking down on democracy and human rights. In the United States, of course, we have our own version of this movement, which is being led by President Trump and many of his Republican allies who are attempting to divide our country up and attack these very same communities. How sad it is that President Trump sees these authoritarian leaders as friends and allies. The authoritarian playbook, by the way, is not new. The challenge we confront today as a nation and as a world is in many ways not different from the one we faced a little less than a century ago during and after the Great Depression of the 1930s. Then as now, deeply rooted and seemingly intractable economic and social disparities led to the rise of right-wing nationalist forces all over the world. In Europe, the anger and despair was ultimately harnessed by authoritarian demagogues who fused corporatism, nationalism, racism, and xenophobia into a political movement that amassed totalitarian power, destroyed democracy, and ultimately murdered millions of people.
So that is the one who will become, should be, if everything goes as it is at the moment, he should be the next president of the United States of America. And then obviously you, more than anybody else, should make your own decisions, and based on what you know about Bernie Sanders' vision and program, you go ahead and vote when you have to do it. So he was referring to the United States of America being now in the hands of a few families. He used the term oligarchs, which to understand it in a very simple manner, basically oligarch is the one who is being basically taking advantage of the vast majority of the Americans and has accumulated an incredible amount of wealth. As he was saying, that there are only three of them, three families in the United States today who own as much as probably half of the population in the United States. He was mentioning about the very poor, more than 40 million people. He also was mentioning about people who have no place to stay, and 500,000 this is mentioning as we speak will have to sleep on the streets. That is then the self-defined socialist, independent candidate in the United States Senate. He's a senator right now from the state of Vermont. He has been in politics since the late 70s, and according to his own biography, he's actually been in every single public office that there is, including mayor, council member, congressman, and now senator. And now this year, after November, if you think that is the solution for the United States of America, he will become the first independent president in the history of this nation since its foundation back in the 1776. Change is coming then. This time probably is real. Probably this time the difference might be made by those who are more informed, because that's something that is new in these elections. It was to a certain extent in the last elections too, because now there is some more access to some information in the internet and some other venues that are not part of the what he called the corporate media. So keep in touch, keep tone, and we will come back covering the United States of America 2020 presidential elections.